Hello, my name is Stacy Bailey, and I'm with the Parish Fire District and as the fire chief, and I'm representing the Manatee County Fire Chiefs Association as the vice president for this year. The key thing about these 9/11 events is that we continue to carry on. So many lives were lost, and it's a hurt that never go away. Events like this bring solace. It actually brings power. And I think as long as we continue to do this, we will display America's resolve. The one thing I remember the most is after President Bush gave his speech, the general stood behind him and said these words that struck with me so diligently throughout the years. Make no mistake, your armed forces are ready. I've carried that with me in my entire career, and I look forward to preparing and making sure that America, Manatee County, Parish, and all the other fire districts are prepared for that emergency response when the duty is called. You know, one key thing about Manatee County and throughout the state of Florida is our preparedness. Firefighters are diligent in checking the equipment every single day. Law enforcement, day to day, they are training with safer training in high schools and active shooters, and you got EMS that's preparing for so many different types of calls like COVID. You lump all that together, and it's a very dynamic field. There are a lot of different avenues and a lot of expertise, and we appreciate everybody's just hard work in preparing, because it takes a team. It takes continuity of operations, all of us melding together and working as one to accomplish a task. And that's what happened after 9/11. Our radios that we use today are significantly better because of the 9/11 Commission. The problems that came out of that event, we as a nation have strived and just prepared even more. So hope we never have to use the resources that we have, but if we do, make no mistake, we're ready.
Hi, my name's Dan Berian. I'm a resident of Bradenton for approximately 20 years. I'm a retired New York City Police Department detective who was a first responder at 9/11. And my son and daughter-in-law are charge paramedics from Manatee County. So their chief, Larry Liu, asked me to speak today. So I'm here to share my story on what happened that day. And the most important thing for everybody to remember is please don't ever forget. It's extremely important. A lot of people sacrificed that day and continue to sacrifice going out, serving our country and serving our cities, letting us sleep well at night. So thank you all. Thank you.
I'm here today as one of the presenters for the 9/11 Memorial for 2022. I'm representing all of emergency services and emergency management to show the coordination and cooperation from all law enforcement, fire, EMS, and all responders during a 9/11 or any other incident may occur in any jurisdiction. As I address the audience today, I will talk about the sacrifices that all first responders, and those are law enforcement, fire, EMS, the military, volunteer organizations, and remind everyone the sacrifices they make by working nights, weekends, holidays, the birthdays they miss, the family outings they miss, and most of all, the coordination that they must have with one another to make the community safe.
Good morning and welcome to the 21st Annual Memorial Service Tributes to Heroes. This morning I'd like to start a few things off with some thank yous to Mayor Brown, Bradenton City Council, and the Fire Chief Tim Gear for our memorial siting hosting this event annually. I'd also like to thank the Manatee County Board of County Commissioners, the County Administrator for getting our proclamation completed this year. I'd like to thank the 9/11 Committee and all the hands that's assisted in making this possible. Through their direct actions, we will remember those that died, those that served, and those who continue to carry on. I'd like to invite Pastor Stan, chaplain of the Cedar Hammock Fire Rescue, for the invocation.
Thank you. Let's bow our heads and pray. God, your word tells us that there's no greater love than this, than for a person to lay down their life for another. And God, today as we gather here today to pay tribute and honor to those who did just that on 9/11, we pause right now and invite your presence to be among us here today. Help us to never forget their sacrifice, their courage, their selflessness. May we learn from their lives to be better citizens. Help us to remember what it means to be Americans, to cherish the freedoms that we enjoy, and inspire us to stand in courage, united as one nation in the midst of adversity. Father, we pray all these things in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Next, we got a few opening comments, and I'd like to invite Commissioner James Satcher for our opening comments.
Thank you, Chief. You know, it was, there are a lot of people here that were not alive on 9/11 of 2001. And I want you to know something. That's good news. The hope and the promise of America, of God and His love, will continue to go forward. It'll be passed down. Each of us have a responsibility to speak up for what's right and for what's good wherever we are and however we can. And if we do that, those evildoers, as our president called them at the time, they'll never have victory over us. You know, the Bible says that the enemy came in like a flood, but God raised up a standard against him. And that's what I think about when I think about America and when I think about 9/11. Were we surprised when we saw the face and the actions of evil? Absolutely. Absolutely. It made no sense. But we rose to the occasion. We stood up for what we believed in. And to these generations that are coming up, I think we owe a responsibility to let everyone that we can know that no, the United States of America may not be perfect, but we're the closest thing on earth at this point in time and in all of history before us. And I believe that's because we made a decision, our founding fathers made a decision to put God first, to put our trust in Him. And I believe in each of our individual lives and in our family, our community, and in our nation. If we seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, all these other things will be added to us no matter what forces come against us. So I want to thank you so much for being here this morning. And I want you to know that it makes a difference what we decide to be important and what we do. And as we honor the things that are important, we cannot be stopped. If we put Him first, I like to say that we do all see the power. There's no doubt about it. I'd love to deny it, but there's power in hate. But love is a greater motivator. Love is the greater power. And once again, if we put Him first, love wins. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next opening speaker is the Honorable Mayor Shirley Groover Bryant from the city of Palmetto. My cousin.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Again, I'm honored to be with you today as we reaffirm America's commitment to never forget the events of September 11th, 2001. As part of that commitment, we honor all those who lost their lives that day and once again celebrate the first responders that ran into the fire and not away from it. To all those we lost on that day and their loved ones, I want to preface my quote with some remarks. The quote that I'm sharing with you today is from Book 4 of the Aeneid by the Roman poet Virgil, which suggests transformative potential of remembrance and is indicative of the museum's mission to honor and remember the victims of the attacks on September 11, 2001. Each letter of this quote was forged from pieces of the recovered World Trade Center steel. Those of you that have visited will likely know exactly what my quote is. To all those we lost on that day and their loved ones, I say this to you. No day shall erase you from the memory of time. Thank you all for being here today. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the Honorable Mayor Gene Brown of the city of Bradenton.
Thank you. And what I want everybody to do right now is just close your eyes and think back to where you were. And that's a pretty easy thing to do, on 9/11 at, early in the morning when that tragedy happened in our country. And, when we look back, and you think about what was happening and over time, what happened in the past. But what we do in this country is we look forward and we look how we're going to make things better. And, one of the things to me is this whole event, and it's a celebration of life, really, when you look at it. We are celebrating what our firefighters, police officers, city employees in New York did that day to save others' lives. And, even though it's a family, and when you look around that family, we are still losing family members that were there that day. I had a cousin who was a New York police officer at the time and actually ran into one of the buildings, got out, but is having health issues today from being there for days afterwards. And he actually was in the Army Reserves and spent over 2 years in Baghdad after that, went in. So, we all have touched family members that are still suffering. And I know, didn't know him very well, but Mrs. Evers is here today, and her husband was there and just recently lost his battle. And it's something that, anything that I did was very minuscule at the end of his life, but anything that we can do as a country to continue to build on this and say, how are we going to be better? Whether it's unifying our country when things happen, and, we know there's a lot of division in things, but it's how we all are going to work together to make things better for the future. And I was going to say what Pastor Satcher said, because he's up here giving a great honor to that. But what it is what we do together and honor God and make it better for that. But as we work together for this, for the future, it's about family, working together and making it better. And one of the things, we've all lost family members, and some of us more recently than others. And when you look back, we've got to make sure that my 12 and 9-year-old grandchildren remember this. And I would like to thank all of the firefighters here, all of the group that continues to do this. You think about probably one of the biggest things that I heard growing up from my mom and where she was when President Kennedy was assassinated. We start to forget those things. Let's never forget this for our families and the fallen heroes. So from the city of Bradenton standpoint, we will always have this venue available as long as I'm involved, and I know our council people are involved. We will always be there to do what we can. We are working now to make this memorial even more of a celebration as we go forward. We're working to make this park even more of a beautiful park, so it will always be celebrated and have people to come and enjoy that part of the park, but also celebrating our fallen heroes. So thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for continuing to do it for us as a community and as a citizen. God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This truly is the friendly city. Next on the program is Miss Angelina Flores with the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
You be seated. Each year, the 9/11 Committee selects 3 speakers that represent specific functions of the emergency services, EMS, law, and fire. This year, our first speaker representing EMS is the Deputy Director of Manatee County Public Safety, Steve Lischauer.
Thank you, Chief. I want to start first by saying what an honor and a privilege it is today to represent public safety as a whole. I'd like to welcome all the state, county, and city officials and all of the first responders. My public safety career has spanned 49 years this November. I currently am the Deputy Director of Public Safety and Emergency Management Chief for Manatee County. My career has taken me across the entire spectrum of law enforcement, fire service, emergency medical, emergency services, and emergency management. The morning of September 11th, 2001, all of us were thinking, as probably many others were, how could that happen? We were amazed and we were shocked. Immediately following the attacks, we saw Americans coming together. No matter what the political party they were, what race, what ethnic group they were, what social status they were, or what income level they were. They were all Americans. People put up American flags on their cars, and they also flew American flags at their home. A total of 2,996 first responders and citizens lost their life that day. Hundreds of thousands of our heroic military members have served the United States since the attacks. Thousands of heroic military members have lost their lives and been wounded defending our great country. We must not only pray for our military members, but also our first responders who protect our homeland each and every day. As Deputy Director of Public Safety and Chief of Emergency Management, I want to take this opportunity to explain the sacrifices and dedication of each and every first responder endures daily for our local community, the great state of Florida, and our country. In emergency management, I'm honored working with all of our heroes and our partners to include law enforcement, fire service, EMS, emergency communication specialists, lifeguards, search and rescue, Red Cross, Salvation Army, and many others. Each of these entities cover our communities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They miss birthdays, anniversaries, holiday functions, graduations, vacations, and other family events. They work nights and weekends to make our homeland safe to all of us. I have the privilege and honor to help coordinate these great entities and partners when any major event or disaster occurs. When any major event or disaster occurs, it is not just the government that makes things happen. It's the first responders, the government entities, public partnerships, private partnerships, nonprofits, volunteer groups as the Red Cross, CERT teams, Salvation Army, and most of all, citizens that brings the community together to forge ahead and to overcome the incident. We must all support the United States, no matter what political party we are. Remember, we're one nation under God. Thank you. God bless Manatee County, and God bless America.
Next, representing the law enforcement arm is Dan Berian, New York Police Department, retired detective.
Good morning. My name is Dan Berian, and along with my beautiful wife, Teresa, I've been a resident of Bradenton since 2004. I retired as a New York City police detective in 2003. I was director of security for Lakewood Ranch for 5 years, and I was chief of public safety for the city of Tampa for 6 years. I would like to thank Larry Liu of Manatee County EMS and Mike Williamson of the Parish Fire Department for this invitation to share my experiences on September 11, 2001. I also want to thank my son Nicholas and his fiancee Phoebe for carrying the family torch of service, as they both are paramedics, charge paramedics for Manatee County. Words cannot express how proud I am of both of you. I also know amongst us today are other members of NYPD, NYFD, and others who were there that day on September 2001. I hope I can enlighten those here with us of what transpired, and I would like to say thank you for your service. I just want to let you know my sole reason for accepting this invitation to speak here is to remind those who listen to please never forget the sacrifices that were made that day. I am humbled by the actions of all that were involved that day 21 years ago, and those who continue daily to deal with the physical and emotional scars and the constant unknown of what ailment may arise at their next doctor's visit. On the morning of September 11, 2001, I arrived at work in Brooklyn around 8 a.m. The location of the building I worked at was right on the water's edge. We had an incredible view of the New York Harbor. The Manhattan skyline was almost a stone's throw away. The towers of the Trade Center were the focal point of the legendary New York City skyline. I have to say the morning of September 11th was a beautiful day. Not a cloud in the sky. The breeze was blowing. It was seriously just one of those days where you have a little bit of extra skip in your step. I sat down and began to read some case folders, ordered breakfast, and waited for the computer to get online. These were the dark ages of dial-up. I monitored the citywide NYPD frequency to know what was going on throughout the Big Apple. As I waited for breakfast to be delivered, I heard one of the female civilian employees screaming, "Oh my God," over and over. I went to see what was upsetting her, and then I saw what it was. There was smoke billowing from the North Tower of the World Trade Center. I stood there for an unknown amount of time, just staring at this strange point. I went back to my office, turned on the police radio, and heard the beginning of the endless chaos that was going to take over New York City that day. I heard the early reports come over the radio of a small commuter plane striking the building. We're trained to keep our cool while transmitting over the radio. It makes it much easier to understand your transmission. But as I listened, I heard the tension and fear in the voices. No screaming yet, but a definite air of uncertainty. I turned on the TV, opened up my locker, and started suiting up in my uniform. This is when the day was in its infancy. Like us, the media had no idea what was going on. The reports on TV were the same as what we were hearing on the police radios. Small plane, smoke, large amounts of debris falling onto the street. At this point, myself and a handful of other detectives had put on our uniforms, collected what gear we thought we could use, and awaited orders on where to report. I took this opportunity, I took the opportunity to make the first of 3 calls. First, I called my wife, Teresa, who was a bond trader in Midtown Manhattan and Park Avenue. She was aware what was going on and did not need me to tell her twice to get out of her office and try to get out of the city. Teresa's office in 1993 was directly across the street from the World Trade Center. She saw firsthand how fast things went downhill during the first bombing. She assured me that she and her fellow employees were leaving the city. We exchanged I love yous and hung up. The second call I made was to my mother, who was at home in Staten Island. She was also aware of what was going on. My mom cried on the phone and, like a good mother, told me to stay in Brooklyn and don't go into the city. My mom passed a few years later, but when I think back of that phone call, I don't remember myself being a 35-year-old police detective talking to my mother. I was a little boy whose mother wanted to protect me. I did what any good son would do. I told my mom they needed us in Brooklyn and we would not be going anywhere near downtown Manhattan. I feel confident that I will get a pass for that lie on Judgment Day, as I told my mom that I was going to be not going into Brooklyn. I trust in God, I am not afraid. That's a phrase that my mom repeated over and over to me. The third phone call I made that day was to my son's preschool that was on Staten Island. I will give you the details of that call shortly. The civilian girls started screaming again. They just watched from across open water the second plane striking the South Tower. The police radio exploded with cops trying to transmit. The lieutenant working that day decided that we would no longer wait for orders. We were heading into Manhattan. 3 of us jumped into an unmarked Ford Taurus. We were in narcotics. We had no marked police cars. I was in the passenger seat, and I put the official Starsky and Hutch bubble light on the roof. We were not far from the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. All we had to do was make it through the tunnel, and we would be let out into the heart of downtown Manhattan, only blocks from where the tower stood. Well, we had no siren, and the traffic was wall to wall. We could no longer see the skyline and could only get information from the police radios we were monitoring. From what we heard, it was all falling apart fast. We eventually made it to the mouth of the tunnel. The transit police stopped us. They advised us that people in Manhattan had freaked out, then drove into both tubes of the tunnel, causing gridlocks. We started to see civilians walking out of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. So we sped off towards the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't remember how long that diversion took, but it only felt like minutes. This is when it all came into focus for me. Besides emergency vehicles, there was no traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge heading into Manhattan. But the entire span of the pedestrian walkway was packed with civilians trying to escape the city. This is when I got my first close-up view of Ground Zero. I was computing in my mind why all these people were running away. It was at this moment that I became overwhelmed with fear. I had been in harm's way plenty of times in my career. I bought drugs from some very hardcore bad guys, but I always felt I was in control. At this moment, I had no control. I wanted to crawl under the dashboard and hide. I asked myself all the time, if I was driving that day, would I have turned around? We made it to the other side of the bridge and only a couple of blocks into Manhattan. We had to abandon our car and make our way on foot. It was somewhere during this time, I believe, that the South Tower fell. A short time later, the North Tower came down. The events that took place during this time period are not something I need to share. This was pure evil. No one's eyes should have to witness what happened on that day. This was murder, this was a declaration of war, and it was an attack on our freedom to believe in God. During that time period, police officer Morris Smith, in a low voice, called for help over her police radio. Someone asked her desperately, "Where are you?" I believe she responded, "On the second floor." There was no longer a second floor. There was no longer any buildings. Officer Morris Smith of the 13th Precinct, Shield number 10467, made no further transmissions that day and was one of the nearly 3,000 people who were murdered. After the dust settled, it was time to regroup and help out who we could. We wound up on the west side of downtown Manhattan. There was complete chaos. It was very hard to walk with all the debris on the ground. At one point, a fireman pulled up in a large SUV. He told us he had an elderly woman who was almost in full respiratory arrest. We said we would help and do what we could. I opened the door to the truck, and there was a woman in her 80s or 90s on oxygen. Her breathing was very shallow and extremely labored. Her daughter, who was in her 60s or 70s, accompanied her. I lifted her from the truck and carried her. One of the detectives carried her wheelchair because it was impossible to roll on the ground. I carried her to the boat dock that was used for commuter boats to ferry customers to and from New Jersey. Once we got her to the dock, we opened her wheelchair and sat her down. Her daughter explained that they were just in the city for a doctor's appointment that morning. She told me her name's mom was Margaret, and we had her out of harm's way, but we had no boat to get her across the water in New Jersey. One of the officers who was on the dock was able to get the attention of one of the tugboats. We like to say he set off a few firecrackers to get the tugboat's attention. The problem was the tugboat's deck was about 15 feet lower than the dock. Somehow we were able to lower Margaret into her wheelchair and her daughter onto the tugboat, and off they went. Some weeks later, I started calling hospitals in New Jersey, trying to find out the condition of Margaret. No one of any of the hospitals I had contacted had a record of anyone being seen by that name or fitting that description. Some years later, a friend mentioned to me that he had a contact in one of the local daily newspapers. His friend was interested in doing a story of me trying to find out the status of Margaret and her daughter. I chose to leave it alone. To this day, I like to believe when that tugboat docked in New Jersey, Margaret and her daughter felt better, jumped into a cab, got home, and lived happily ever after. Sometimes it's better to leave some stones unturned. As we searched for survivors, our efforts were limited to the outskirts of the area. Building 7 was burning and would eventually fall early in the evening. But until that time, we could not enter too deep into the area. There was no water or electricity, landline phones were not working, and most cell phones transmitted off of the now downed North Tower. Word got out amongst the numerous boats in the area that we were able to load folks from our location. This really helped get people out of the attack area. Eventually, as those boats came, they were bearing well-needed gifts of water, food, and additional emergency service workers. Later that night, when Building 7 had fallen and nighttime settled in, I sat down to rest for a few minutes. I was angry, very angry. How could God allow evil like this to kill and maim? When you're a cop, a fireman, in the military, you know that death could be around the corner. But these were everyday people commuting into the city from suburbia. They were civilians. They were people trying to pay the bills, save a few dollars to fly to Disney with their family on vacation. They were not supposed to come to work and have to decide to burn to death or jump to their death. How many civilians will be left without a parent? How many mothers will suffer burying their child if there isn't even a body to bury? This was unacceptable. My mom made a request from me the day I graduated the police academy. She asked me never to lose my compassion. As I sat there, I found it very hard to have compassion, and my faith was gone. I now started to think about the third phone call I made that morning to my son's preschool. I told him that I had no idea when Teresa or I would be home. The director of the school told me not to worry, that all the children will be safe, and they will stay with them as long as needed. I thanked her and was about to hang up when she said one of the teachers wanted to talk to me. This woman got on the line. It was not my son's teacher, but I saw her every morning when I dropped Nick off at school. She wanted to let me know that her daughter was working in the tower that was struck. I told her that that we were all going to the building and it would take time. But like in 1993 attack, we will get everyone out. But it will take some time. She thanked me and we hung up. I started to worry. What happened to this woman's daughter? I told her it was going to be okay. Her daughter was murdered that day. Her name was Patricia Puma. She was survived by her 3 small children and her husband. Her body was never found, and a few weeks later, they held a service for her in a local funeral home. There wasn't a casket, just numerous photos of Patricia with her family. When we were not working at Ground Zero at the landfill, we were at funerals or some sort of memorial service. I have to say it was endless, looking for people's loved ones for 16 hours, then off to a funeral. This was day after day. Way too much grief to deal with. The night I went to Patricia's service, I was in my dress uniform because prior to that service, I had attended a previous funeral that day. I did not want to face this woman. She was going to hate me. I gave her false hope. I led her to believe that all was going to be okay. When my turn in the long line finally came to see this woman, she reached out to me, told me that she felt so troubled by how I must have been feeling. She said she knew I would be upset and that she had burdened me. Where do people like this get their strength? I was there to comfort her in her time of need. Instead, it was I who was being comforted by this kind woman. I cried, and she was my strength. She never returned to the preschool to work. Instead, she stayed home and raised her 3 young grandchildren while her son-in-law returned to work. By sunrise on the 12th, we were all back at Ground Zero. We had found the rooftop of an ambulance and were trying to cut through it in hopes of finding life inside. From all the crushed concrete and all the broken water pipes, the ground in most areas was covered with a gray, slurry liquid. It was almost at my knees as we cut away at the ambulance. At that time, an old fireman ran over to us because he believed a piece of another building was going to fall. We all turned to run, but both of my legs were stuck under the murky ground and my feet were under a steel I-beam. My upper body turned and my feet stayed fixed. I mangled my left knee and the guys I was with stayed to help and get me out. The other building never fell. I went to the emergency room. They told me I damaged my knee and told me to see an orthopedist ASAP. They wrapped my knee and we went back to work. I was able to work until April 8th of 2002, and then I had to concede that it was time for surgery. Unfortunately, the damage to my knee was extensive and would lead to an early retirement from the NYPD I so loved. During the months after 9/11, we would rotate working on the pile at Ground Zero or working at Staten Island landfill. At Ground Zero, whenever you found the body, we would stop, have them bring a Stokes basket up, load all the remains into it. It would be covered, and we would all salute as it was carried away. It was very ceremonial, and you knew another family would get some closure. But things were very different at the landfill. Front loaders would constantly load debris into these giant sifters that were attached to conveyor belts. We would, for hours on end, watch things zip by. If you saw something that was important, like jewelry, ID, pictures, etc., you would remove it from the belt and deposit them into a bucket. At the end of your shift, you would bring that bucket to a tent, and they would log it all in. But on that belt, human remains also went by. Those went into a separate bucket, and at the end of the shift, that bucket, like the others, would be removed to the morgue. No pomp and circumstance, no salute, just a ride in a bucket. After my surgery and the realization that my police career is over, I tried to figure things out about God and my lost faith. I thought back to what would have happened if the tunnel were not blocked. Would we have arrived at the foot of the tower just prior to its collapsing? What if the other building on the 12th had fallen and I was struck? I believe it was the second year we were living here in Lakewood Ranch. Teresa was substituting at McNeil Elementary and Nick was in first grade. Working at Lakewood Ranch at the time, I would stop by and have lunch with Nick at school. I walked in one day as Teresa was doing lunch duty. I was about to say hello when one of the kids threw an unopened milk container, striking her in the head. I went to go admonish this child and realized he was choking. He was unable to get her attention, so he threw his milk at her. I pulled him away from the table and began striking him on the back over and over. Eventually, a piece of pizza popped out of his mouth, He got his color back, and he has a great story to tell every time he eats pizza. Is this why the tunnel was blocked? Is this why my career had to end so abruptly? Did I have to be here for that child on that day? I taught my son Nick to be compassionate, just as my mom taught me. But I also tell him that it is better to die on your feet than live on your knees. Be strong. Don't allow anyone to tarnish your faith or your honor. There are so many other things that happened back in September of 2001, that I have not shared. But for the people who are closest to me, they hear me talk about Publix all the time. I remind them that when you're at Publix in a 10 items or less checkout line, and the lady in front of you has 12 items, who cares? Life is too short to worry about the small things. Take the time to spend with your loved ones. No one ever laid on their deathbed and wished that they had worked more. When a child asks you a question, put down the remote, turn and look at them in the eye and listen to them. Let them know that they are important. These are moments we can never get back. Many good people died that day. I think of them often. Many more have died since, from cancers and respiratory diseases. And unfortunately, I'm sure more will continue to fall from the toxins that we were exposed to. But some of the more painful after effects of that day are those who could no longer deal with what they saw. Many have chosen to end their pain by their own hand. Today, when you stop and pray for those who were murdered, please remember that they are at peace. Pray for those who have to live on without their loved ones. Pray for those who serve our cities and our country daily, who walk into harm's way so we can sleep soundly. And pray for the children that together we may guide them to choose the right roads. May God bless us all and guide us all. Thank you for listening, and please, please never forget. Thank you. Thank you, buddy. Thank you.
I appreciate your mother, for sure. The next speaker representing fire is Dan Spino, retired from Elizabeth, New Jersey Fire Department. Dan?
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, 9/11 Committee, and thank you all. Good morning. Thank you for sharing this day. As he said, my name is Danny Spino. I'm retired fire captain from Elizabeth, New Jersey, which is just on the other side of the Hudson, about 20 miles away from downtown Manhattan. I'm here today with my family, my wife Dina, my 12-year-old son Anthony, my 10-year-old daughter Callie, my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law, who's also retired from Newark, New Jersey Police Department and a retired Vietnam veteran. I was asked a couple days ago to give a speech by the committee, and I said, I don't know if you want me giving a speech. I wasn't there when the buildings came down, and I wasn't there when the people got trapped, and I didn't lose half of my company, and Mike had informed me that's not what your story is about. Your story is about responding to ground zero, search and rescue, and living your life with a disease that you live with today of 21 years later. And I said, that story I can tell. So just as the detective told his story, which is different than mine, but a lot of the details are exactly the same. My story started on September 11th, 2001, 21 years ago. And I had 4 years on the job at that time. Just like he said, and you've heard, it was a beautiful day, blue skies, crystal clear vision. It was just a gorgeous, everyday, typical day. And we started our routine. I just got off of a 24-hour shift at the fire department. And I had a cup of coffee with the boys in the morning and headed out to my, as most firemen, my part-time job. I do construction, and I was doing a demo job a couple towns over from Elizabeth. And headed out, went to my job. There was no electric there. We were working off of generators and batteries. And I remember the time the first plane hit, a few of the guys came running in and were telling me, a plane hit the trade center. And just like the detective said, I thought it was a Cessna, just like they did, just like everybody did. And I was like, nah, that's happened before. We got a lot of high rises in that area. And, they went back to work. A few minutes later, they came running in with a different look this time. And they said, Danny, something's going on. Another plane, and they believe it was a jet, hit the second building. Well, at that time, I had to listen to the radio, and I told him I got to see this. So I ran across the street with a couple of guys banging on a door that we knew had power, and I had my badge and I was holding it up. I said, please let me see your TV. And the lady who answered, her eyes looked exactly like theirs did. And she said, please come in, and was telling me on our way to her kitchen what was going on. Well, I saw it with my eyes right there on the TV, and I said, something's not right. We need to, I got to call them fire headquarters, which I did immediately while there's still cell phone service. And my dispatcher told me, come in now as soon as you can get here. And that's what I did. I dropped everything and I started flying down there. And I got to the firehouse, and it was chaos there, as you can imagine. A lot of guys just like myself were coming in. They're in their part-time gear. They're trying to get their gear together, the uniforms. Our fire trucks are going right over there. Elizabeth Rescue, hazmats. We had everything going over. We were taking our reserve rigs. We were jumping on those going. We had buses, and we just headed out. As soon as we had enough guy to fill trucks and fire buses, we headed out. And I was on one of them, and I responded. And it was quiet. You can hear a pin drop, and till we got out there. And just like the detective said, on arrival. Now I grew up in that area. I was down there, the bars, the parties, the fun times, and this wasn't that. This was gray. This was smoky and fiery. This was hell. And that's all I can think for a moment while our companies were gathering their accountabilities. I looked around and said, what the hell did I get into? And for the next 3 days, we just searched voids. We searched tunnels. The chief was saying at downtime, we'd go up on the bucket line. I called it. I don't know if that's what it is. And we had those buckets. And by hand, we just loaded them with concrete. And they went down the pile all the way to a dumping area. And every now and then a bucket would have a hand or a foot or a part we couldn't know. And it had to go to the makeshift morgue that was right there. And like he said, that body parts went that way and debris went this way. And that was my next 3 days, just working my butt off there, until on the third day I was relieved by other EFD personnel. As you can imagine, we just wanted to keep accountability of our own guys. We didn't even know where the incident command post. I don't even know if we knew what that was at the time, but we just wanted the accountability of our own men. On the third day, then, when I went back to the other side of the Hudson, like he said, we attended funerals. I myself attended about a dozen of them, and they asked the Elizabeth Fire Department to use their apparatus and manpower in our Class A's to lead a lot of the processions. And I did it sometimes with 3 other guys. I remember one, I did it myself, and I was so scared. I had the whole family walking behind my fire truck as I'm leading them down from the funeral home to the cemetery. And you can never get used to seeing a kid at a funeral home holding a fire helmet from his father. And sometimes the case, that was all that was left of his hero. In 2003, the New Jersey started to follow first responders that worked at Ground Zero. It was called the World Trade Center Health Program, and it still exists today, and it's also in New York City. Ours was located in Rutgers College in New Brunswick, and that's where all us first responders went there, and it was headed by Dr. Iris Udison. She's amazing. The program has just done wonders for us, even if it was just someone to go there and talk to. That was one of the things we all needed. We couldn't make sense of it, and we needed to go talk to people, and they were amazing with that. And I started going to that program in 2003, and I went every other year, a couple of years, I missed. Then in the winter of 2016, not too long ago, 15 years after that day, I made it 15 years, and I remember chasing my son up the stairs in my house. I'm sure he wasn't doing anything he shouldn't have been doing, but I chased him up the top of the stairs, and I kind of leaned over to breathe, to catch my breath. And I thought, well, that's not normal. That's nothing I'm used to. A couple days later, I go out, and this is the winter. I go out to the mailbox. There's a little walk down the driveway, get the mail, come back, same thing. I'm leaned over and it's taking me 10 minutes. And so I tell my wife the story, and she says we should go get your personal physician and get yourself a physical. So I said, it sounds like a plan. So we headed out. I got my doctor to do a full physical, x-rays and scans. She called me not too many days later, and this came right from the doctor. It's never a good sign when a doctor calls you. And she called me up and told me to come in. She went over my results, telling me that there were red flags all over your results, which just dropped me. And I was like what? And she said, you have scars all on your lungs and enlarged lymph nodes all around your aorta. So I told her, well, what can that be? Can it be pneumonia? Do I have pneumonia? Please let me have pneumonia. And she informed me, no, we're not sure. We have to do tests, but you could possibly have some metastasized cancer going on. It could be testicular, colon, lymphoma, and nothing sounded good to me. So we did a couple, 2 months of testing. And finally, they said we have to do a surgery and take out a lymph node, which is when I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis of the lungs, otherwise known as pulmonary sarcoidosis. And a lot of firefighters, it went up 600% in firefighters that responded to ground zero. A lot of them have it in their lungs like myself. A lot of them have it in their heart. And a lot of them died from it. And a lot of them, like myself, are living with it today. It's an autoimmune disease that they believe is caused by the environment. That's what I got. So I told them the environment, there was my red flag. I called Dr. Udison immediately. And I said, Dr. Udison, I was just diagnosed with pulmonary sarcoidosis. And she said, Danny, get your results and come in and schedule an appointment immediately. And I did. And that's when she did inform me that it went up at 600%. And she knew exactly where I got it from, that I don't fit the criteria for getting sarcoidosis in any other way. So then again, the next few weeks, more testing to see the extent of the damage on my lungs and my breathing. After testing results, the doctors agreed and the department that they were not going to release me back to full-time duty or as a firefighter altogether and put me back into hazards of this being a firefighter. So I would have to retire on a medical disability. Well, this stunned me because I had little kids at the time and I didn't know where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I didn't know anything. So on August 1st, 2016, my birthday, I retired after serving 20 years at Elizabeth Fire Department, and my career came to an end. My breathing was still an issue in the cold weather, so we needed to make plans. We needed to move south somewhere warm. Can't get warmer than Florida. So in 2017, my family, my mother, and my in-laws, all them sitting there, and my dog Bella, God rest her soul, all made the move and landed down in Lakewood Ranch. Although sarcoidosis can never be cured, I get monitored every year and treat the symptoms with inhalers and steroids as needed. I'm not complaining because I am alive, which is more than a lot of my fellow brothers and sisters that are no longer with us can say. I am grateful every day to see my son Anthony play baseball, my daughter Callie ride horses, my wife, well, spend money. I get to see, like the detective was saying, I get to see holidays and birthdays and events and anniversaries. And I don't take one day for granted. So in conclusion, today is not only a day to remember, but a day to pray for our heroes we have lost, the many more we will lose, and the families like mine that continue to push forward despite the many changes that very tragic day in American history on September 11th, 2001 has caused. I thank you all for coming out this morning and to prove people still do remember. I would like to also thank our frontline first responders and our military all over the world for keeping this country safe. And may God bless America. Thank you.
great speakers this year. Thank you. Now's the time where we transition the program to the Fallen Firefighters Memorial, and I'd like to introduce Training Officer and member of the 9/11 Committee, Bob Mikulski.
Good morning. Again, my name is Bob Mikulski. I'm a member of the 9/11 Committee. And so as we all know, this service is for the year 2021. However, our committee, when it was formed after the 9/11 incident, our founding member and the backbone of our committee, Richard Evers, we all called him Richie, passed away recently. So we'd just like to recognize him this year, and then again, he will be recognized next year when we recognize 2022. 139 firefighters died in line of duty in 2021 nationally, including Thomas M. Barber, Michelle Clore, Jimmy D. Riley, Eric M. Cena, Herb Thomas from the state of Florida, and never let us forget Manatee County's line of duty death, Brian Reed, West Manatee Fire Rescue, 2001.
The Manatee County Emergency Communications Center pauses to remember those 139 fire personnel lost in the line of duty nationwide during 2021, including Thomas M. Barber, Mitchell Floor, Jimmy D. Riley Jr., Eric M. Cena, and Herb Thomas from the state of Florida. We remember and honor the line of duty death of firefighter Brian Reed in 2001. May the road riders meet them, may the wind be always at their back, and may the Lord hold them in the palm of his hands until we meet again. CAN DM 569, Manatee County Fire Radio.
So the dove release that we're going to do, Denise Evers is going to do it in honor of Richie. It's considered a symbol of peace, hope, and freedom. Most families say it helps the grieving process start. So what happens is they'll release the dove and it'll fly up overhead, and then when they release the rest of the doves, they're going to join up that dove and they're going to take it back home. Will everybody please stand for the military honor salute, the volley, and taps, please? Honor guard, uniformed personnel, Everyone can sit down, please. Now I know what these rappers feel like when you come with a posse. This is our 9/11 committee. Well, thank you very much, and thank you guys and everybody for attending. I do want to make a few announcements and thank Dr. Scott Hoax, Commissioner Bellamy, Attorney Mark Barnaby, Representative Will Robinson, and I do want to do a shout out for former Palmetto Fire District firefighter, city councilman, mayor, state representative, and our current Senator Jim Boyd, who couldn't make it here with us today. Merriam-Webster dictionary defines the call of duty as an obligatory task, conduct, service, or special functions that arise from one's position. It's also paraphrased as something difficult or unpleasant that has to be done or completed. Call to duty is very special to the emergency services. On each side of our memorial, on the law enforcement side, it says in Manatee County, who have answered the call. On the EMS side, it lists duty, honor, and commitment, duty being number 1. And on the fire side, when I'm called to duty. As mentioned, this is the 21st year of 9/11. Last year was a very momentous year because it was the 20th anniversary. And this group behind us, who puts this on every year, no matter what, did a thorough job. But what I don't think that they know is that this is an even specialer year for us here in Manatee County because this is our 20th anniversary for putting this memorial service on. The way this memorial service came about was in early 2002. We had a lot of local firefighters that had strong ties to the New York area and all traveled up there to be with their brothers that attended funerals and attended their families during this time. When they came back, that joint emergency services group got together and said, we have to do something down here. What they saw, that they would say, never forget. And that would be our mantra to this day today. Since the inception of this committee, our commitment to this memorial service and to those two words, never forget, has never wavered.
or impede this group for putting this on. Not even construction, when we were building this site and we couldn't do it here. Mayor Bryant accepted this group, and we went over to the city of Palmetto one year until this site could be built so graciously by the city of Bradenton and Mayor Poston. Not even a hurricane could stop us during Irma. Not even a global pandemic could stop this group and stop this county and these residents. Call to duty. Over the past 2 decades, since the inception of 2002, I just want to go back with you a little history from our first speaker, Colonel John Saputo. He had one message and one message only that came directly from MacDill Central Command. We are winning this war. Since that, over the past 20 years, we've had great speakers, special guest speakers from NYFD. Kevin Shea from Rescue 1, Nick Garagano, and our own Garrett Lindgren of Rescue 3. Captain Al Fuentes, who was trapped for over 2 hours under the tower's rubble, was rescued and has came here to speak. And our very own Richie Evers, Rescue 2, called to duty. We've had our armed forces here. We had Brigadier Xavier Lebedo. We had a Lieutenant Colonel and current Representative Tommy Gregory speak last year of how great America is. I don't normally ask for an applause during a speech, but if you're so inclined, you may applause. A little premature, let me give you one more chance. I call for the applause for May 2nd, 2011, another date that we should not forget. That is for our brave SEAL Team 6. Took out Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Thank you. Call to duty. We've had representatives from our law enforcement, from Charlie Wells Sr., Rick Wells, Bill Tokager, Scott Tyler, who spoke of all the bravery that was done and all the things that they had to do after 9/11. We had emergency medical staff members, hospital nurses, hospital administrators, like Chris Malloy, Denise Evers, Steve Kraviniak, Aaron White, Larry Liu, Ryan Bill, on extraordinary efforts of medical treatment that day and how that changed their service. For our speakers this year and our speakers in the past, we thank them for all their stories that they've shared with us of triumphs and not tragedy. Every year this committee comes up with a dedication that we want to do, and this year Sunday was about family, that more families could come, and that's what we did. But we also had a second one that they didn't know about this 20th anniversary, is our commitment and our courage and our sense of duty. And these gentlemen behind me that put this on every year. We have only one member of this committee that has been steadfast and been here the full 20 years, and in which I'd like to acknowledge him today. Captain Bob Mikulski from the East Manatee Fire Rescue. Which is inscribed. This is the Richard A. Evers Call to Duty Award, presented to Bob this day. Tribute to Heroes Committee. Thank you, Bob. You all may be seated, because I'm going to be quick. We have two more individuals that are going to be the recipient of this award this year. This lady needs no introduction. Not only has she sung for us on many times, she's an advocate for us. She's also one of the trailblazers, the reason we have this memorial. Councilwoman Marion Barnaby. And our final recipient, who's only in his sophomore year, which only Tom Brady in his second year of Michigan rivals that. I'm a Michigan guy. But we have great things moving forward for this memorial. When Richie was going through his final fight, we had talked for years about upgrading this memorial site, about putting some signage up so when people walk through they know what this is, about pulling bricks up for memorial to raise money for the burn center. And that was Richie's dream. So myself and Bob Mikulski went to Mayor Gene Brown and had a meeting that was facilitated by NDC's Construction, Cork Miller. And we went to him and asked him what we wanted to do for Richie. He didn't bat an eye. He said, we're going to do this. So we're going to redo this site. I can't thank you enough, Mayor. I know you're carrying Richie's card. So on behalf of this Tribute to Heroes Committee, Mayor, we thank you so much for what you've done and what you are going to do. And hopefully, I guarantee that this will be done by the 25th anniversary. Mayor, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys. So much.
So in closing, I would like to tell you, and just have you get up one more time, for these gentlemen here that put this on every year. They're the ones that actually do the work, you know. Guys, thank you.
For our closing benediction, I'd like to invite back up again Pastor Stan Pankovic, chaplain.
You know, before I close in prayer. As a local pastor and a member of the community, a husband, father, and grandfather, from the bottom of my heart, I just want to thank each one of you that have served our community and served our nation to make it a better place to live. And I just also want to express my appreciation for living in such an awesome city and county that values first responders and invites them, along with clergy, to be involved in a 9/11 remembrance event such as this. That certainly speaks volumes of the heart of our city and county and the leadership that we have here. And I just want to say thank you. Let's just bow our heads and pray right now. Father, as we leave here today, reflecting on the lives that were sacrificed on 9/11, help us again never to forget their sacrifice, their courage, their selflessness. Help us to remember how fragile life is, and help us never to take life for granted. Father, protect us from harm's way, God. Give our leaders wisdom so that they can make choices to prevent another day such as 9/11. May we leave here with a renewed commitment to each other, to our community, to our country, and to you as our God. And we ask all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Lastly, we'd just like to thank everyone again for your attendance to the 21st annual event. Very memorable. This one will go down in history. And I was honored to MC it. But again, next year, same time, same station.
Well, I'm very proud today. As most of you know, this is the 21st anniversary of the horrible attacks of September 11th. But even more, it's our 20th anniversary for this committee that was started in 2002. And we have never wavered from this memorial, whether it was construction, when we were building the site, hurricanes couldn't stop us, or neither a global pandemic wouldn't stop us. So I'm very honored and humbled to be a part of this group. And I thank so much that our local government officials, our legislative delegation, our county commission, our municipal officers, our mayors, they support us 100%. So, like I said, I'm very humbled and honored to be a part of this. Richie's very near and dear, and if you watch the video this year, when I get up and speak, I choke up because he was special. I loved him. He embodied the spirit of call to duty. The reason he passed was because of 9/11. Now, he was retired when 9/11 happened, but he still had his gear and went down there and actually found his old Rescue 2 rig. Unfortunately, all of the members of Rescue 2 passed away that day. But he was the workhorse of this group and kept us on point. And it's one way to honor him and to epitomize what he meant to this organization. 50 years in the fire service. For generations of the fire service, the EMS system, and law enforcement officers, and anybody on this committee, to keep on endeavoring to never forget.
Well, I just want to thank this committee, because without this committee that's done it for 20 plus years now, this wouldn't be even a celebration. And we talk about, something with such a big tragedy that happened to our country 21 years ago, but we're here today to celebrate, obviously, what they all have done. And obviously, Richie was the original starter of it and really got it going. And while being there, he was working to promote and, actually, save more lives, as people would know about. But when you look at things, it's just an honor. I mean, I'm honored, humbled, and just great to be here. And Richie's wife is doing such a great job at keeping this going forward. So, okay. Well, I think one of the most important things, and it's all of us, it's everybody that's involved in this, to know. And I think back, and I said it in my remarks this morning, One of the things that, with my mom, she talked about where she was when President Kennedy was shot, and you remember that. And, the history starts to go away or fade away as time goes on. This is something that, as far as I'm involved, as far as I'm alive, whether I'm in government or not, this is something that needs to go on forever, because my grandchildren, their grandchildren, and everybody's families need to completely celebrate this. So we never forget the people that lost their lives, but also to celebrate our country that we will never forget and keep it going forward.
I have to say, this was a complete shock to me. I'm not sure I deserve it. When I think of the sacrifices that have been made in our city, in our county, in our state, in our country, it's quite an honor. And it is very important that we always remember the events of September 11th and that we do not allow it to fade from memory.